Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Anime Library. Starting with Roger's Ghost, I Command an Invincible Soul Army Part 6 Chapter 103, the five-man group defeated. Rayleigh steps in. Kizaru watched as his reign of light was completely swallowed by that air door appearing out of thin air, and the perennially lewd smile on his face finally showed a crack. His eyes narrowed slightly behind his lenses, a flash of surprise flitting through them. Oh! An interesting ability. However, that trace of surprise didn't linger for more than half a second. As the Marine's highest combat power, battle experience had long since integrated into his instincts. The moment number one finished diverting the attack, Kizaru's figure dissolved into a cluster of light spots where he stood and vanished. In the next second, he appeared out of thin air in front of number one, a long sword shining with blinding golden light ama no Murakumo already condensed in his hand. Without the slightest hesitation, he slashed down. Fast. Fast to the extreme. Number one's pupils contracted violently. He didn't even have time to activate his fruit ability again and could only rely on his tempered battle instincts to draw the saber at his waist. He poured his life's armament hockey into it without reservation and held the blade horizontally to block. Clang! The sound of clashing metal was so piercing it felt like it would tear one's eardrums. The two swords remained in a stalemate for less than a second. An irresistible, overwhelming force like a mountain-toppling wave surged from the blade. Number one felt as if his arms had been hit head-on by a high-speed train, even his bones were groaning in pain. His pupils were shaking violently. Meanwhile, Kizaru still wore that relaxed, punchable expression, as if he were merely trimming his fingernails. Crack! Number one's saber snapped upon impact, and the momentum of the ama no Murakumo's blade did not diminish, slashing heavily into his chest. Put! Number one was struck as if by a lightning bolt, his entire body turning into a cannonball as he flew backward. He smashed through several ruined walls along the way before finally being embedded deep into the debris of a building, kicking up a cloud of dust. All of this happened in a flash. Number one. Number two had only just recovered from his shock, a roar of grief and indignation still stuck in his throat. A golden flash had already appeared before his eyes. Kizaru's infuriating face was inches away, and a right leg wrapped in destructive light, carrying a shrill whistle that tore through the air, kicked him savagely in the waist. Bang! Before number two could even react, he followed in number one's footsteps, being kicked away at an even faster speed. You've got to be kidding me! Seeing number one and number two being insta-killed one after another, number four's eyes instantly turned blood red, and he was completely enraged. Bastard Kizaru! With a roar, the long sword in his hand whipped up a sharp slash aimed at Kizaru. However, Kizaru just casually raised the ama no Murakumo and blocked it effortlessly. Clang! How scary, he drawled, his face still wearing that expression that could annoy someone to death. I almost got killed there. You bastard! Looking at Kizaru's punchable face, number four's reason was completely consumed by rage. Like a madman, he brandished his long sword, repeatedly slashing at Kizaru. Kizaru lazily parried a few times. Seeming to find it a bit boring, he flicked his wrist, pushing number four's saber away. Immediately after, he condensed a point of lethal golden light at the tip of his left index finger. Shoo! 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 Several lasers, like the gaze of a death god, were fired at number four in succession. Alarm bells rang in number four's heart. His survival instinct made him push the Sub Nomi's ability to its limit without a second thought. Those lethal lasers, capable of piercing through steel, hit his body but were slid away one by one as if hitting a mirror coated in lubricant, firing off randomly in all directions. Boom! 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 Several deep, bottomless holes were blasted into the ground, with black smoke billowing out. Kizaru looked at this scene in surprise, instantly figuring out the various strange abilities of those guys from before. I see, they've all eaten devil fruits? Truly, a bunch of monsters. Watching the lasers slide off him, a trace of relief rose in number four's heart. However, he didn't have long to be happy. As a Marine Admiral, how rich was Kizaru's combat experience? In the moment number 4 was distracted, suffocatingly powerful armament hockey had already condensed on Kizaru's right leg. With a flash, he appeared before number 4 again. Bang! A savage kick landed squarely on him. Including the flying number 4, the Elite 5 had now been entirely defeated. Ha ha! Ha 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 ha! Seeing those 5 figures who had been so arrogant just a moment ago now lying in the ruins like tattered sacks, Rear Admiral Skart suddenly became excited. Clutching his highly swollen face, he let out a frantic laugh. You pirates! Weren't you acting all high and mighty just now? Come on! Get back up and hit me again! While mocking them frantically, he stumbled over to number 3, who was still struggling to get up. Drawing his saber and coating it in armament hockey, he prepared to finish off the guy who had just sent him flying. Kizaru looked at the somewhat petty and maddened Skart, his brow furrowing imperceptibly. He felt something wasn't quite right. Just as Skart's blade was about to fall, a figure appeared before Skart like a ghost, silently. Who? Kizaru's pupil shrank, and almost at the same time, he turned into a flash of light and rushed over. Clang! Kizaru's Ama no Murakumo clashed violently with a seemingly ordinary Western longsword. 2 completely different yet equally powerful auras collided with a boom, intertwining and creating a shockwave that directly sent the confused Skart flying. Kizaru stared intently at the newcomer, and for the first time, a truly solemn expression appeared on his lazy face. Pluton. Silver's Rayleigh. Have you also mixed yourself up with the 10,000 Souls pirates? Rayleigh only gave a faint glance at the blown-away Skart and said in a flat tone, not at all. I just can't stand seeing you Marines bullying people like this. The 2 swords clashed again, and sizzling electric sparks flickered in the air. After several exchanges, the 2 backed away from each other. Rayleigh spoke up, Kizaru, you only see the tragic state of your Marine base, but do you not want to first understand the specific reason why this happened? As he spoke, his gaze passed over Kizaru to look at the group of shivering slaves and the hideous-faced Skart not far away. Kizaru followed his gaze. The slaves, who were so scared they had almost lost their voices, seemed to have found their pillar of support upon seeing Rayleigh's appearance. Finally, someone plucked up the courage to explain loudly. This Admiral, a man shouted tremblingly. We were rescued from a slave ship by the 10,000 Souls pirates. These 5 benefactors brought us to this Marine base to seek help from the Marines to send us back to our hometowns. Another slave also pointed at Skart and added, his voice carrying a sob, however, this Marine Rear Admiral aggressively slandered our 5 benefactors. He said they were the ones who imprisoned us. He even arrogantly belittled the benefactors' 10,000 Souls pirates and wanted to capture them all. The 5 benefactors only fought back out of necessity. Shut up! Skart immediately panicked. He scrambled to his feet and pointed at the group of slaves, cursing loudly. What do you lowly slaves know? Pirates are the most selfish and cunning. How could they possibly help you for no reason? There must be some ulterior motive. I was acting for your safety. What's wrong with capturing them? Then, he looked at Kizaru with an air of absolute loyalty. Admiral Kizaru. Don't be bewitched by these ignorant slaves. A pirate is a pirate. Once a pirate, always a pirate. Pirates are all trash. Rayleigh, standing to the side, couldn't listen anymore. What's going on? As I'm listening, how did this sarcasm end up directed at me too? Without another word, his figure flashed as he moved again. Although Kizaru already faintly understood the truth of the matter, he could only brace himself and meet Rayleigh's attack. He had some understanding of the 10,000 Souls pirates. Although this pirate crew acted eccentrically, since their debut, they indeed had no record of robbing or killing civilians. Therefore, what those slaves said was likely true. But there was no other way. Even if it really was Rear Admiral Skart's fault, that would have to be sanctioned and judged by the Marines. How could a pirate be allowed to take action? Chapter 104, Lingyi arrives, lightning kick. On the Myriad Soul ship not far from the Sabaody archipelago, the atmosphere suddenly froze. Redfield's shrewd eyes, which seemed able to see through everything, suddenly shrank. He stepped in front of Lin Yi and said urgently, "Captain, the 5 of them have been heavily injured by Kizaru." He closed his eyes, seemingly sensing the battle in the distance, his tone becoming increasingly solemn. "Right now, Pluton Rayleigh is stopping the Marines from continuing their attack." "What?" Lin Yi stood up abruptly, causing his lounge chair to flip over onto the ground, but he didn't notice. A cold fury rose from him, and the surrounding air seemed to drop several degrees. "Well done, Kizaru. Well done, Marines." He laughed out of extreme anger, his teeth grinding audibly. "It's fine if they don't give us an award for doing good deeds, but they dare to lay hands on our people? Do they really think I'm made of mud?" Beside him, Roger's phantom was stunned for a moment when he heard the name Rayleigh, then a brilliant laugh broke out on his face. "Rayleigh! He's here too, ha 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 ha, my good brother." He slapped his thigh, his face full of nostalgia and excitement. "It's been many years since we last met, thank goodness he was there to help. I'll have to buy him a good drink later." The fury in Lin Yi's heart was slightly diluted by this bit of good fortune. Although given the Marines' usual behavior, they likely wouldn't dare to actually do anything to the Elite 5, as that would mean going to full-scale war with an enhanced version of a 4 Emperor's crew. But what if? What if Kizaru had a lapse in judgment and decided to take a lethal strike to avenge the sword wound he received back at Impel Down? They were all his closest friends and family, the painstaking effort he had personally cultivated. "No, I can't wait anymore." Lin Yi didn't want to wait a single second longer. He snapped his head around, his gaze like a torch, looking at Redfield. "Ride!" A loud shout, no more words needed. Redfield's figure instantly turned into a stream of light, understanding the intent, and rushed into Lin Yi, merging directly into his body. Buzz! A massive power exploded within Lin Yi's limbs and bones. Blinding lightning surged wildly across his body, making a sizzle-sizzle crackling sound. He carefully sensed this power. It didn't bring an explosive increase in strength like the fusion with Roger did. However, with the enhancement of the Rumble Fruit's ability, his observation hockey's perception range expanded exponentially, and his understanding of speed instantly reached a brand new realm. It was as if the entire world had slowed down. Adaptation took less than half a second. In the next second, Lin Yi's figure distorted in place, and with a deafening thunderclap, he turned into a brilliant bolt of lightning that pierced through the heavens, tearing through the atmosphere as he shot toward the Sabaody archipelago. Meanwhile, in Area 66, Kizaru was unhurriedly clashing with Rayleigh in a health-preserving sword fight. The AMA no Murakumo and Rayleigh's Western sword traded blows. It looked intense, but in reality, both were holding back. When the blade edges collided, not even a single spark was produced. How scary, Kizaru calculated in his mind while lazily swinging his sword. How should he wrap this up? Take these 5 ghostly things back to headquarters? No, that would be hard to explain to the 10,000 Souls pirates. Just let them go? That didn't seem right either, the Marines would lose face. Truly, what a drag. Just as he was distracted thinking about how to write the report, Rayleigh, opposite him, suddenly paused. His weathered eyes looked past Kizaru's shoulder toward the sea behind, and then, a meaningful smile curled at the corners of his mouth. Immediately after, Rayleigh's figure flashed as he actively retreated over a dozen meters, pulling away and sheathing his sword. He folded his arms leisurely and spoke lazily to Kizaru. "Admiral Kizaru, the main player has arrived. Are you prepared to face their wrath?" Kizaru was momentarily stunned, not yet reacting to the meaning behind Rayleigh's words. But his body and his observation hockey had already issued the sharpest, most frantic alarm before his brain could. A hair-raising chill exploded from behind him without warning. A terrifying aura so powerful it made even him feel heart palpitations appeared behind him like a teleportation. Kizaru's pupils instantly shrank to the size of pinpricks. A cold, slightly playful voice echoed faintly in his ear. "Speed is power, Kizaru. Have you ever been kicked by lightning?" Before the voice even faded, Kizaru only had time to rely on instinct, pushing his armament hockey to the limit and barely raising an arm to block his face. From the corner of his eye, he glimpsed a foot flickering with destructive lightning, carrying the power to tear through space, rapidly enlarging in his pupils. The next second, bang! A thunderous boom erupted, as if heaven and earth had collapsed from this single kick. Kizaru felt an irresistible, overwhelming, and terrifying force smash violently into his arm. Crack! The crisp sound of bone shattering was clearly audible. His arm bone, which was strong enough to withstand thousands of troops, snapped under this single blow. Immediately after, his own arm was driven by this massive force and slammed hard against his eternally wretched face. Kizaru's mouth was knocked askew, and his entire face was distorted and deformed, like a piece of crumpled scrap paper. Then, his entire body was like a meteor falling from the sky being hit head-on, turning into a golden shooting star as he was sent flying backward. Boom, 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 boom. A series of deafening explosions. Admiral Borsellino's figure smashed through dozens of sturdy buildings along the way, finally crashing in an extremely pathetic state into that Urukuman mangrove in Area 66, which had a diameter of over 100 meters. The massive mangrove let out an overburdened wail and snapped in half from the middle. Dust filled the sky, soaring upward. The entire field was dead silent. Only then did Lin Yi slowly lower his foot, casually brushing off non-existent dust from his pant leg. He turned his head and looked at Rayleigh, who was not far away with a shocked expression and a mouth wide enough to fit an egg, and gave a friendly smile. "You must be Rayleigh. Thank you for your help." Lin Yi paused and added, "Roger will be over in a bit." Rayleigh. He really couldn't figure out how this new captain of Rogers, at such a young age, could possess such terrifyingly inconceivable strength. One kick, and he sent a Marine Admiral flying? He had thought that some of the old monsters from the 10,000 Souls pirates would have come personally. Lin Yi didn't pay any more attention to the petrified Rayleigh and walked straight toward the Elite Five, who were supporting each other and were equally dumbfounded. "Are you guys okay?" He frowned as he looked at their disheveled appearances. "It's really been hard on you to encounter such nonsense." "Boss, we're fine." Number 1 clutched his chest, looked at Lin Yi, regained his spirit, and quickly replied. He pointed at Rayleigh and said with lingering fear, "We still need to properly thank this Mr. Rayleigh. If he hadn't stepped in to help, I'm afraid number 3 would have already." After speaking, his gaze turned back to Rear Admiral Scart, who was still immersed in the terrifying scene of a Marine Admiral being kicked away and was shivering with fear. Number 1's eyes instantly turned cold, and he said through gritted teeth, "The culprit is this idiot Rear Admiral." Lin Yi's gaze swept over coldly. When Scart was looked at, he immediately jolted and snapped out of his horror. Looking at that figure which resembled a demon god, his soul almost left his body, and he waved his hands repeatedly. "No. It has nothing to do with me." His voice was out of tune. "The one who injured them was Admiral Kizaru. I was the one being beaten the whole time." Lin Yi didn't bother listening to his excuses. Back on the Myriad Soul ship, he had already heard from number 1 how arrogant this Marine Rear Admiral was. Now that they met, he had instead become as cowardly as a dog. Lin Yi slowly raised his right hand, and a lethal spark of electricity jumped and condensed at his fingertip. When Scart saw that spark, he was scared witless, begging for mercy frantically while scrambling backward on his hands and feet. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was wrong. I shouldn't have laid hands on the 5 of them. It was me. My eyes were blinded by greed." He accidentally tripped over a piece of rubble and fell pathetically onto his buttocks. Seeing that the lightning at Lin Yi's fingertip didn't stop condensing at all despite his begging, the fear of death was instantly replaced by shame and anger. You dared to touch me!" he screamed with feigned bravado. "I am Roseward Saint's man. Do you know what kind of existence Roseward Saint is? He is a master of the world, a celestial dragon. If you dare to touch me, Roseward Saint will definitely not let your 10,000 Souls pirates off." Hearing the words celestial dragon, Rayleigh's expression changed slightly, and he was about to open his mouth to warn Lin Yi. However, after Lin Yi heard that the other party was a celestial dragon's dog, there wasn't even a ripple on his face. The lightning at his fingertip only became a few shades more brilliant. In the next second, he flicked his finger. Whoosh! A blinding bolt of lightning tore through the air and instantly struck Scart's body. Ah! Scart let out a shrill scream that didn't sound human. His entire body convulsed violently in the lightning, and then he turned into a charred corpse smelling of roasted meat, lying quietly on the ground. Rayleigh opened his mouth. In the end, he still said nothing. Chapter 105, Reunion. After a long time, let's have a hug. A blinding golden light struggled to fly out from the ruins of the snapped Urukaman mangrove in the distance. The light was dim and flickering, like a light bulb with a bad connection. The speck of light slowly coalesced not far from Lin Yi, finally transforming into Kizaru's iconic, wretched face. Only now, that face no longer held its usual laziness and composure. A trace of blood he hadn't wiped clean hung from the corner of his mouth. The arm he had hastily used to block Lin Yi's thunderous kick was dangling at a bizarre angle, clearly fractured. Kizaru bared his teeth and rubbed his injured arm, trying to snap it back into place, the pain making his face twitch. For a monster-level physique like his, this injury wouldn't kill him, but it really, really hurt. After a long while, he finally looked up, his gaze behind his lenses fixed intently on Lin Yi. His tone no longer held even a hint of mockery. How scary, he drawled the words, but this catchphrase was heartfelt this time. Every syllable was laced with lingering fear. 10,000 souls, Demon Emperor Lin Yi, your strength has improved to a terrifying degree. It was too frightening, truly. With that one kick, he felt like he had almost been sent to the afterlife on the spot. Lin Yi was on a completely different level compared to when they met at Impel Down years ago. Lin Yi narrowed his eyes and stared at him coldly, as if looking at a glowing pile of trouble. Kizaru, did your scar heal so fast you forgot the pain? You actually dared to bully my subordinates? As he spoke, he prepared to give Kizaru another taste of his power. Give me a break. Seeing Lin Yi's eager expression, Kizaru's survival instinct instantly maxed out, and he quickly raised both hands in a gesture of surrender. It was indeed my fault for not clarifying the situation immediately. My mistake, my mistake. He admitted defeat at light speed with an incredibly sincere attitude. However, your subordinates did indeed tear down one of our marine bases. Me giving them a little lesson is also considered reasonable, right? He chose his words carefully, fearing any sentence might provoke the calamity before him again. Besides, haven't you already dealt with the culprit just now? This matter, let's just stop here and turn the page, how about it? Clearly, although he had been kicked away, his observation hockey had remained active, and he was perfectly aware of what happened afterward. That Rear Admiral named Scat's final performance of admitting fault while shifting the blame had completely killed any desire Kizaru had to stand up for him. That kind of idiot deserved to die. It was just the marine cleaning house. Looking at Kizaru's "I'm just here to clock in, please don't hit me" cowardly appearance, Lin Yi's anger mostly dissipated. That kick of his had vented a lot of frustration. Furthermore, on his side, the Elite Five had been a bit heavy-handed, leveling the base and causing heavy marine casualties. As for them, though they looked miserable, they were soul bodies. They could be back on their feet in minutes with some soul material, so there were no substantial losses. Thinking of this, he curled his lip and finally relented. Fine, then it ends here. Kizaru breathed a long sigh of relief, feeling like he had come back to life. However, Lin Yi's tone shifted, and his eyes became somewhat dangerous. I heard very clearly just now that death-seeking Rear Admiral said his master was a celestial dragon. You, go back and tell Sengoku to have him pass the word to those old fogies in the Gorosei. Don't let that celestial pig come to the Sabaody archipelago seeking death, otherwise. He paused and flashed a kind smile. If he truly dies at my hands, don't blame me for not warning you. For the next few days, our 10,000 souls pirates will be resupplying at Sabaody before heading to the New World. You Marines had better not disturb us. Kizaru's eyelids twitched at this blatant threat. He had also heard Scat's words before he died, and in his heart, he had already cursed the damned Scat over 800 times. I will report to Fleet Admiral Sengoku, he nodded somewhat helplessly. He had already made up his mind, this kind of troublesome matter should be the leader's headache. As soon as he got back, he'd apply for a business trip to the New World to catch some blind pirates. As for the mess with the celestial dragons, whoever wanted to deal with it could go ahead. He didn't want to deal with these monsters of the 10,000 Souls pirates for even another second. Nothing good ever happened when he met them. Lin Yi turned his gaze to the group of slaves still huddled together, his tone softening slightly. Also, these poor people were rescued from the slave ship. You arrange things and help settle them properly. Kazara followed his gaze, looking at those terror-stricken faces, and nodded. He didn't decline this, rest assured, this is something we Marines should do. With that, he pulled out a den mushi and began calling his subordinates to handle the aftermath. Seeing that everything had been explained, Lin Yi didn't feel like staying any longer. With a wave of his hand, that familiar 10,000 Souls banner, emitting an ominous aura, appeared out of thin air. Buzz, the banner unfurled, and an invisible suction instantly enveloped the entire ruins of the Marine base. The souls of the Marines who had just died in the conflict turned into specks of light and were continuously sucked into the banner. Kazara's brow furrowed deeply as he watched this scene, but in the end, he said nothing and didn't dare to stop it. After collecting his spoils of war, Lin Yi waved to the Elite Five, "Let's go." The five followed immediately, and Rayleigh smiled, following close behind. When they reached the shore, with a thought from Lin Yi, a tall and elegant figure separated from his body, it was Patrick Redfield. Rayleigh was startled by this sudden appearance of a person, and his footsteps faltered. Patrick Redfield smoothed his meticulous formal attire, turned around, and bowed slightly to Rayleigh with a very gentlemanly smile. "Hello there, Mr. Rayleigh." Rayleigh. His mouth hung slightly open as he looked at the face before him, completely stunned. This solitary legend who once, by his own strength alone, could stand on equal footing with Roger and Whitebeard, how could he? Hello? Hello? It took Rayleigh a while to react, responding somewhat stutteringly. On the other side, Lin Yi had already begun treating the wounded. He used his will to instantly crush the souls he had just detained from the Marine base within the 10,000 Souls banner, turning them into the purest soul material. Then, like in Fordrip, he injected it into the soul bodies of the Elite Five. To the naked eye, the gruesome wounds inflicted on them by Kazara were healing at a speed that defied physics, and their flagging auras grew strong once again. Rayleigh once again expressed his heartfelt amazement at this miraculous sight. The various strange devil fruits in this world were truly too interesting. Just then, a massive pirate ship, entirely black with a demon totem for a figurehead, was cutting through the waves with an overbearing posture, approaching rapidly. Following that, a bold and deafeningly loud voice rang out from the ship, echoing across the entire coast. "Rayleigh!" Rayleigh looked toward the sound, and when he saw the figure on the deck waving vigorously at him, a brilliant smile instantly bloomed on his face, a joy from the heart at a reunion after a long separation. "Roger!" He also smiled and raised his hand, waving back. Then, he saw that familiar figure leap directly from the deck hundreds of meters away, like a cannonball, flying toward him with the sound of whistling wind. "Ah, Rayleigh, I'm here." Watching that figure trace a perfect parabola in the air without any sign of slowing down, the smile on Rayleigh's face slowly froze. Something's not right. This distance, this speed. Hey! Hey! Roger! The smile on Rayleigh's face gradually vanished, replaced by a hint of terror, and his voice became urgent. "Slow the hell down." However, Roger in midair clearly didn't feel anything was wrong, thinking Rayleigh was cheering in excitement for their reunion. He even adjusted his posture in the air to ensure he could give a solid hug of love. Rayleigh wanted to run. He sidestepped twice, only to discover in despair that he had already been locked onto by that familiar and domineering observation hockey. No escape. "Holy shit, you bastard Roger!" Rumble. Accompanied by Rayleigh's desperate roar, Roger's figure, like a small meteorite, slammed solidly into him, pinning him to the ground. The ground cracked upon impact, creating a crater several meters in diameter as dust filled the air. Roger, however, acted as if nothing had happened, sitting contentedly on Rayleigh while slapping his shoulder hard, letting out a hearty laugh. "Ah, Rayleigh. Long time no see. Have you been doing well all these years?" From the dust came Rayleigh's teeth-gritted mutter, sounding as if it were squeezed out from hell. Roger! I am going to kill you. Chapter 106, Admiral Kizaru? Slipping away, Sabaody Archipelago, Area 13, Shaki's rip-off bar. Inside the bar, laughter and cheers almost lifted the roof, and the crisp sound of clinking glasses was constant. However, in this ocean of joy, there was one corner emitting a thick aura of resentment. Gulp, gulp. Roger, who not long ago was high-spirited and ready to give his first mate a hug of love, was now sporting a massive lump on his head. He was huddled in the corner of the bar looking aggrieved, downing glass after glass of solitary drink. Rayleigh walked over with a glass, sat down beside him testily, and watched his captain's pathetic state, his mouth twitching uncontrollably. With that strike just now, he had vented all the resentment accumulated over the past 10+ years. Who told this bastard to almost send him to the afterlife the moment they met? Alright, stop faking it. Rayleigh sighed helplessly and proactively clinked his glass against Roger's. If you keep drinking, Shaki is going to charge you double for the liquor. Roger rubbed the large lump on his head, winced, and turned around. Upon seeing Rayleigh, his spirits immediately lifted again. You brat, your hands are still as heavy as ever. He complained verbally, but his face broke into his signature brilliant smile. Rayleigh looked at him and smiled too, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes filled with the weight of years and the joy of reunion. He took a sip of wine, his gaze passing over Roger's shoulder to look at Lin Yi, who was currently competing in drinking with the Elite Five nearby. Roger, he asked softly, all these years, have you been assisting this young man in his growth? He paused, his tone becoming somewhat complex. Is he the person you've been waiting for? Ha ha ha. Upon hearing this, Roger burst into a fit of heroic laughter. He threw an arm around Rayleigh's shoulder and lowered his voice, but his eyes sparkled with an unprecedented light. Him? He is, and he isn't. Rayleigh was taken aback. Roger continued, even though he isn't a D, I believe he will be even more outstanding than the person I'm waiting for. He is even more likely to realize that dream. Rayleigh was completely stunned. He knew Roger too well. This man had incredibly high standards, even Shanks and Buggy back in the day had never received such high praise from him. This young man named Lin Yi, just what kind of magic did he possess? Rayleigh's gaze turned toward Lin Yi again, then swept over the deep-breathing, unfathomable figures in the bar. Bullet, Redfield, although Golden Lion Shiki wasn't here, the lineup before him was already infinitely close to the Rocks pirates that dominated the entire sea back then. And this young man was the captain who commanded this group of monsters. Perhaps it really was possible. A warm current surged in Rayleigh's heart, not only because his old friend could live another life in this way, but also because he was sincerely happy that Roger had found such an excellent successor. Ha ha ha, good. Rayleigh raised his glass and clinked it heavily against Roger's. It looks like what that brat Shanks is going to do next will just be the icing on the cake for you guys. Ha ha ha, drink. The two legendary pirates looked at each other and smiled, draining their glasses in one go. Putting down his glass, Roger's expression suddenly became mischievous. He winked and nudged Rayleigh with his elbow. Hey, let's talk business. How are things going between you and Shaki? Pfft, cough cough. Rayleigh almost spat out his wine. His old face instantly turned bright red, his eyes darted around, and he said stubbornly, Wah, what do you mean? I have no idea what you're talking about. Just then, a mood-killing voice with a unique yo-ho-ho-ho laugh interrupted. Brooke, that perverted skeleton, had at some point approached Shaki while she was wiping glasses, holding his own drink. He bowed slightly, striking what he thought was a gentlemanly pose. Beautiful lady, although I have no eyes, your radiance still leaves me enchanted, so, could you let me see your panties? Shaki hadn't even had time to speak, and the smile on her face hadn't even had time to change. Bang! An extremely fast dark shadow flashed by. Rayleigh, whose face had been as red as a monkey's but just a moment ago, had jumped up at some point. With a powerful flying kick, he accurately struck Brooke's skeletal face. Whoosh! Brooke didn't even have time to let out a scream before he turned into a graceful parabola, flying out of the bar entrance and disappearing into the distant night. Lin Yi, _. This guy who never learns. Shaki maintained her intellectual smile, but her eyes as she looked at Rayleigh held a hint of playfulness and tenderness. A moment later, Brooke rubbed his bones that felt like they were falling apart and walked back in from outside, bowing to Rayleigh with an apologetic face. Yo ho ho ho, my apologies, Mr. Rayleigh. I didn't know this beautiful lady was your sweetheart. My apologies for the offense, my apologies. What are you talking about? Rayleigh instantly flared up, forcing an explanation. I just had a leg cramp. Yes, a leg cramp. I accidentally kicked you, I should be the one saying sorry. Pfft, ha 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 ha. Rayleigh, you brat. Everyone could no longer hold it in and burst into earth-shattering laughter. The last bit of estrangement between everyone from their first meeting completely vanished with that kick. Lin Yi stood up with a smile and raised his glass high. Come, everyone. Let's toast Mr. Rayleigh to thank him for his righteous help. Thank you for your help, Mr. Rayleigh. The Elite Five immediately responded, raising their glasses in unison. Cheers. Looking at this group of hearty fellows, Rayleigh couldn't help but laugh as well, raising his glass and draining it. You're too kind, ha. Meanwhile, far away at Marineford, the Marine headquarters. Kazara first strolled to the medical department, had the medics wrap a thick layer of bandages around his arm, and even specifically had them tie 2 exaggerated bowknots. Only then did he slowly wander to the Fleet Admiral's office door. Knock knock knock. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, base number 66 has been captured by the 10,000 Souls pirates. Kizaru put on a pained expression as soon as he entered, his voice carrying 3 parts fatigue and 7 parts grievance. The Marines in the base have all fallen in battle. What? Sengoku, who was reviewing documents, suddenly looked up. When he saw the glaring bandages on Kazara's arm, he stood up in shock. Weren't they just some nobodies from the 10,000 Souls pirates? How could, and what happened to the injury on your hand? Kazara let out a long sigh and began his complaining performance that he had been brewing the whole way. He vividly described how he was tied down by Dark King Rayleigh and then how he was ambushed by that vicious Lin Yi. When he got to the dangerous parts, he even specifically shook his bandaged arm. I was still exchanging moves with Rayleigh when he, without a word, came up with a kick aimed straight at my head. Fleet Admiral, you have no idea, that power, that speed. Kizaru patted his chest with a face full of lingering fear. If I hadn't reacted quickly and blocked with my hand, I wouldn't be back to sea. You now. After hearing this half-true, half-false description, Sengoku's brow furrowed into a knot. So, Lin Yi himself already possesses true Emperor-level strength, he asked solemnly. How could it be so fast, and this incident also involved the celestial dragons? Yes, Kizaru nodded. No one expected this Lin Yi's strength to improve so quickly. Looking at this admiral whom he had ordered around for years and who had now returned with injuries, a hint of guilt rose in Sengoku's heart. Hard work, Borsellino. His tone softened. I will report to the Gorosei. You go down and have a good rest first. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, Kizaru immediately straightened his back and said righteously, This is all my duty. The situation in the New World is currently a mess. As an admiral, how can I rest? He took a step forward, his eyes shining, his voice powerful and resonant. I apply to go to the New World and continue my mission. Sengoku looked at Kizaru, who had suddenly become so proactive and responsible, and for a moment, he was actually somewhat moved. He had really misjudged this kid before. I could tell he was capable since he was young. After I retire, I'll let him and Akiji compete fairly for the position of Fleet Admiral. Good. I grant it. Sengoku patted Kizaru's shoulder with satisfaction. However, you must also pay attention to your health. Thank you, Fleet Admiral. An imperceptible glint of joy flashed in Kizaru's eyes. He saluted, turned around, and left with a quick step. The moment he left the office, he immediately urged his warship to start. With that speed, he wished he could install 2 rocket boosters on the ship's stern. Sengoku looked at Kizaru's energetic back and nodded with satisfaction. He turned back to the office, picked up the Den Den mushi on the desk, and prepared to report the situation to the Gorosei. Just as he picked up the receiver, his movements suddenly froze. Wait. Something's not right. A thought flashed through Sengoku's mind like lightning. Kizaru is gone, then if something happens to the celestial dragons on Sabaody Archipelago and an admiral needs to be dispatched, who should be sent for support? Oh no! I've been tricked. Sengoku's face changed drastically. He rushed out of the office and roared toward the harbor with all his might, "Quick! Stop Admiral Kizaru!" However, the Marines at the harbor looked at each other in confusion. Just now, they had seen with their own eyes that Admiral Kizaru, thinking the warship was too slow, directly activated his glint fruit ability at the stern and forcibly pushed the warship away. Now, not even a shadow of the ship could be seen on the horizon. Sengoku stood at the office door, the sea breeze blowing his fleet admiral's coat. He was shaking with rage, and finally, he could only let out a cry of powerless fury toward the empty sea that echoed through Marineford. Chikusho! Borsalino! Chapter 107, Celestial Dragon attacked on the vast sea. A marine warship was cutting through the waves. On the deck, Kizaru slowly unwound the exaggerated bandage on his arm, revealing the mostly healed, slightly reddened skin beneath. He touched it with his hand, his eyes narrowing slightly behind his lenses, a hint of imperceptible gravity showing through his eternally lewd smile. Mahi drawled, murmuring to the sea breeze, "I forgot to tell the fleet admiral that Lin Yi Kid's kick actually carried lightning." "Forget it, I'll mention it next time I'm back at headquarters." Meanwhile, on Sabaody Archipelago. In Shaki's rip-off bar, a hearty banquet finally came to an end. Lin Yi began to issue orders. He waved to the crowd, "John, take the Elite 5 and restock supplies first. When you're done, contact Don Quixote da Flamingo to discuss our deal." "Yes, Captain." John took the order and left with the Elite 5, arms around each other's shoulders. With a thought, the phantom of the 10,000 souls banner appeared, pouring out the general souls and other ordinary souls seized from Thriller Bark. He scanned them, picking and choosing like he was selecting cabbages, selecting dozens whose auras were relatively solid. As for the remaining riff-raff, they were a waste of space even as cannon fodder. Without a shred of pity, Lin Yi instantly crushed them into the purest soul material and infused it directly into those dozens of elites. Having done all this, he looked at Redfield, who was slowly wiping the cuffs of his formal suit. "Ride, these guys are in your hands." Lin Yi pointed to the group of enhanced general souls and said casually, "Make do with them for now. Set up the framework of an intelligence network and get a clear picture of the general situation in the new world." He thought for a moment and added, "Also, take Brooke and find him a reliable manager. Don't let him spend all day thinking about looking at ladies' panties." Redfield adjusted his monocle, a glint flashing on the lens. He bowed slightly, his posture as elegant as a nobleman about to attend a banquet. "Very well, I will arrange it immediately." Yahohoho Brooke stepped forward with light steps to say goodbye, took off his top hat, and gave Lin Yi a standard gentlemanly bow. "Mr. Lin Yi, thank you for your help and care during these days." Go on, go on." Lin Yi waved his hand impatiently. "Remember to head back to the Devil's Triangle later and wait for Straw Hat." "Understood, Mr. Lin Yi." Subsequently, Redfield left silently with Brooke and this group of newly recruited intelligence reserves. Their destination was the black market where the sun never shines, a breeding ground for information and vice. Meanwhile, Bullet, that battle maniac, couldn't wait to run back to the Myriad Soul ship as soon as the banquet ended. To him, alcohol was far less satisfying than sweat. The bar grew quiet, leaving only Lin Yi, Rayleigh, and the still high-spirited Roger. "Let's go." Roger threw an arm around Lin Yi's neck and grabbed Rayleigh with the other, laughing loudly. "It's a rare visit, let's go explore Sabaody properly. I've missed the food here for a long time." Rayleigh looked helpless but didn't refuse, allowing this lawless fellow to drag him out of the bar. The three of them ate and strolled. Roger was like a wild horse let out of its stable, finding everything novel. He bought a bunch of random snacks, stuffing them into his own mouth while enthusiastically feeding Lin Yi and Rayleigh. Rayleigh avoided his sauce-covered hand in disgust, but Lin Yi accepted everything, eating with great relish. In this rare moment of leisure, a sudden change occurred. The once bustling crowd on the street seemed to have a mute button pressed, all the noise vanished in an instant. Then, pedestrians and vendors on both sides of the street, regardless of age or gender, all knelt down in unison, burying their heads deep, their bodies shaking like sieves. It was a bone-deep, reflexive fear. Lin Yi was biting into a skewer of takoyaki when he saw this eerie scene and was momentarily stunned. Oh no! Rayleigh's expression changed drastically. His reaction was lightning fast as he grabbed the bewildered Lin Yi and Roger, dragging them into a narrow alleyway. What's going on? Lin Yi asked, looking puzzled. Rayleigh leaned against the wall, sighed helplessly, and explained in a low voice, "It's the celestial dragons." Celestial dragons? Lin Yi's eyes instantly turned cold, a dangerous curve hooking his lips. It seems they didn't take my warning seriously. He instinctively wanted to step out. Then, looking at the serious expression on Rayleigh's face beside him, he pulled back his foot. Forget it, I can't involve Rayleigh's secluded life. If I have to hide, I'll hide. Little did he know, just as he decided to keep the peace, the conversation coming from outside the alley was like a spark that instantly ignited the powder keg in his heart. A guard's cautious voice came through. Saint Roseward, the Gorosei asked that you refrain from going out recently to avoid encountering that vicious 10,000 souls demon Emperor Lin Yi. How about, we head back to the Holy Land first? Bang! A crisp gunshot rang out. Following that was a pampered, shrill voice, full of offended rage. You bastard! Who gave you the nerve to tell me what to do? Inside the alley, the three of them could clearly hear the dull thud of the guard hitting the ground and the even more suppressed gasps of the surrounding crowd. They heard the celestial dragon named Roseward Saint continue to shriek, "That damn pirate called Lin Yi. He's already slaughtered so many of my good dogs. How could I possibly let him go? Those old geezers in the Gorosei actually want me to hide in the Holy Land? Based on what? A mere pirate. Not only am I coming out, but I'm also going to capture him and make him my slave mount. I'll ride him every day to vent my anger." Inside the alley, there was dead silence. Rayleigh could clearly feel the air temperature beside him suddenly drop to the freezing point. He turned his head and saw that the smile on Lin Yi's face had vanished, replaced by a chilling murderous intent. Good. You want me as your mount, do you? Lin Yi's knuckles cracked, and veins bulged on his forehead. I was thinking of letting you off, but you just had to seek death. Then don't blame me. Seeing Lin Yi about to take action. Don't be impulsive. Rayleigh quickly reached out to stop him. It's fine, Rayleigh. Roger threw an arm around Rayleigh's shoulder, a smile on his face as if he were enjoying the chaos. Leave it to my young captain, he knows what he's doing. Rayleigh looked at these two lawless individuals, one old and one young, and clutched his forehead in a headache. Outside the alley, a cold light flashed in Lin Yi's eyes as he drew the shikaseiken from his waist. He didn't rush out, but simply pointed the blade at the guard lying beside the celestial dragon. An invisible mental ripple instantly rippled out from the sword. The guard's body suddenly stiffened, his eyes instantly becoming hollow, and then he was dominated by a pure, tyrannical desire to kill. He stood up, abruptly drew his saber, turned, and slashed down hard at the master he had sworn loyalty to. Slash! Caught off guard, a bloodstain deep enough to show bone was slashed across Roseward Saint's back. Ah! A scream so shrill it didn't sound human pierced the sky of Sabaody. However, it wasn't over yet. Having succeeded with the sword, the controlled guard followed up with a punch, carrying the force of the wind, and slammed it hard into Roseward Saint's head. Bang! The bubble helmet that symbolized his noble status shattered like an eggshell. The force of the punch didn't diminish at all, landing squarely on his pampered face. Roseward Saint was beaten beyond recognition, falling to the ground like a broken sack, wailing in agony. Roseward Saint! You bastard! What are you doing? Only then did the other guards react. Surprised and enraged, they quickly kicked away their attacking comrade and scrambled to protect Roseward Saint and check his injuries. As for the surrounding civilians, their minds went blank the moment they saw the celestial dragon being attacked. The next second, extreme terror erupted. Run! A celestial dragon has been attacked. An admiral is coming. Run! The scene instantly turned into chaos. The crowd was like a boiling pot, screaming and scattering in all directions. In the chaos, the controlled guard roared as he scrambled up, waving his saber and slashing at his comrades like a madman. Stop him! Subdue him, quickly! The guards could only swarm him, pinning him firmly to the ground. Bang! 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 Just then, Roseward Saint, lying on the ground clutching his bloodied face, tremblingly raised his golden pistol and fired wildly at the chaotic crowd in front of him. You! Damn commoner! Die! Die! Bullets were fired indiscriminately. Several guards who were pinning down the attacker couldn't dodge in time and were hit on the spot, falling into pools of blood with screams. Gunshots echoed through the street until the magazine was empty. On the ground lay 4 or 5 lifeless guard bodies, their blood staining the earth beneath the celestial dragon's feet. Chapter 108, Lin Yi playing dumb bastard. It hurt so much. It wasn't until it was confirmed that the crazed guard had completely breathed his last, having been kicked into the corner by a companion and remaining motionless, that Roseward Saint's pig-slaughtering scream once again echoed through the street. It hurts. Ah! Clutching his back, which was bleeding profusely, and his face, which was already completely unrecognizable, he rolled on the ground, crying out for his parents. That voice was even sharper and more piercing than when he had fired the gun earlier. After a period of heart-wrenching howling, perhaps due to excessive blood loss or perhaps because he had simply fainted from the pain, his eyes rolled back, and he became completely still. Roseward Saint. The surviving guards were scared out of their wits. They lifted him up in a frantic scramble and rushed toward the Holy Land, stumbling and crawling. They had to get him medical treatment immediately. Rayleigh watched everything before him in disbelief. From the celestial dragon being cut to the internal strife and gunfight, and then to the group of people fleeing in a panic, the entire process was so fast that his brain felt a bit stalled. Was this your doing? His gaze finally landed on the young man beside him, who looked completely unperturbed. His eyes were fixed on the long sword in Lin Yi's hand, which had just been returned to its sheath but still retained a trace of an eerie green glow. Lin Yi smiled as he fully sheathed the shikasaiken and spread his hands. The innocent expression on his face could practically win an Oscar. What are you talking about, Mr. Rayleigh? You shouldn't slander a good person, he said seriously. This was clearly that guard who, over the years, couldn't take the oppression of his master, the celestial dragon, and finally chose to heroically sacrifice himself and rise up in resistance. What does it have to do with me? The corners of Lin Yi's mouth curled up slightly, however, the triumphant smile that flashed through his eyes couldn't be hidden no matter what. Rayleigh. Although he had no evidence, he would bet his reputation for this entire lifetime that the guard's sudden madness was definitely related to the eerie light that had emanated from Lin Yi's sword. Alright, Rayleigh. Roger slapped Rayleigh on the back with such force that he almost couldn't catch his breath. He laughed heartlessly and forcefully dragged Rayleigh toward the other end of the street. Let's continue wandering around other places, don't let this little interlude spoil the fun. Looking at this former captain who seemed to fear that the world wasn't chaotic enough, and that bold Lin Yi, Rayleigh truly felt that he was old. Let them be. He shook his head helplessly and was dragged away by Roger, disappearing at the end of the chaotic street. Holy Land, Mary Geos. What? When they saw the blood-covered and unconscious Roseward Saint being carried back, the entire Holy Land was in an uproar. The news seemed to grow wings and reach the ears of the Gorosei immediately. Inside the room of authority, the atmosphere was as heavy as water. On Satan Saint's furrowed face, a clear look of surprise appeared for the first time. He suddenly stood up from his seat and asked in a low voice, Did Lin Yi make a move? The person reporting knelt on the ground, their body shaking like a sieve, and explained in a panic, No, Gorosei lords. Roseward Saint was was attacked by one of his own guards. It wasn't Lin Ye's doing. How is that possible? The blonde Nusjiro saint was the first to express disbelief. Has this guard eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall? They were all raised by us from childhood and went through layers of screening. Their loyalty is absolutely beyond question. The reporting person swallowed hard and reported tremblingly, according to the other accompanying guards, it was because that guard had been shot and wounded by Roseward Saint earlier. Later, he might have harbored resentment and rose up in resistance. The 5 old men looked at each other, and all saw deep suspicion in each other's eyes. This reason sounded clearly unreasonable. No matter how they thought about it, something felt wrong. Satan Saint was silent for a moment, then slowly sat down and waved his hand, his voice cold. Fine, you may leave. He paused and added another sentence in a grim tone. By the way, send down the order to execute all the other accompanying guards. Yes, yes. My lord. The reporting person felt as if they had been granted a great reprieve and scrambled out. Inside the room of authority, dead silence returned once more. It was Lin Ye's doing, right? Nusjiro Saint held the Shodai Katetsu, his tone certain. Warcurie Saint echoed, besides him, I really can't think of anyone else on Sabaody Archipelago who has the guts and such mysterious means to dare do such a thing. Satan Saint didn't speak, but silently took out a golden den mushi from his robes. Puru puru, puru puru. Kacha. From the other end of the den mushi, a lazy voice came through. Lin Yi looked at the vibrating den mushi in his hand and knew that these old men were calling to demand an explanation. However, he hadn't shown his face in this matter at all. At most, it was just suspicion without a shred of substantial evidence. What was there to fear? He picked up the den mushi with an innocent face, his tone as pure and kind as could be. Moshi moshi. Gorosei lords, why are you looking for me so suddenly? Is there something wrong? The den mushi vividly mimicked Lin Ye's harmless face. Looking at this face playing dumb, Satan Saint's temples throbbed as he suppressed his anger and went straight to the point. Lin Yi, you were the one who attacked Roseward Saint, weren't you? Ha? Lin Ye's tone was full of shock and confusion. What are you saying, Satan Saint? I'm having a good time shopping with friends on Sabaody Archipelago. Why would I go looking for trouble by attacking a celestial dragon? He paused and analyzed in a very rational tone. Besides, is there any benefit to support me doing that? I have no motive. Although there's no substantial benefit, it would certainly make you feel very good. Satan Saint grumbled to himself, but it was impossible for him to actually say it out loud. Whether you did it or not, you should know in your heart, Satan Saint said coldly. I don't even understand what you're talking about. Lin Yi started acting shamelessly. I'm warning you not to slander me. Satan Saint took a deep breath. He didn't want to waste any more time and urged directly, fine. Once you've played enough on Sabaody Archipelago, hurry up and head to the New World. Hearing this, Lin Yi knew the other party didn't intend to pursue the matter further. He quit while he was ahead, and his tone became much more pleasant. All right. Once we've resupplied, we'll go to the New World, definitely. Good. Satan Saint nodded and then decisively hung up the den mushi. That's it? Rayleigh had overheard the entire conversation, and his expression at this moment was even more shocked than when he saw the celestial dragon being cut earlier. The incident of a celestial dragon being attacked just ended so hastily? He looked at Lin Yi, his eyes complex to the extreme. Although I don't know what the current world government is planning, Roger comforted with a laugh. Judging from the current situation, they won't continue to target us. He threw an arm around Rayleigh's shoulder and warmly issued an invitation. How about it, Rayleigh? Do you want to go to the New World with us again? Upon hearing this, Rayleigh shook his head like a pellet drum and hurriedly waved his hands. Forget it. I don't want to go on adventures anymore. Roger's expression suddenly became mischievous as he winked and teased, You just can't bear to leave Shaki, right? No way. Rayleigh bristled like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. I just feel like I'm already old. It's time to retire and have a good rest. Oh, is that so? Ha ha ha. Roger elongated his tone, laughing smugly. Looking at Roger's sarcastic manner, Rayleigh's old face turned beet red with embarrassment and annoyance. Roger! Take this punch. He suddenly threw a punch. Who's afraid of you? I was going easy on you before. Not to be outdone, Roger met him with a flying kick. In the next second, these two legendary great pirates were brawling on the roadside, trading punches and kicks like children. Chapter 109, The Battle of Four Great Swordsmen. Jihahaha, how exhilarating. Before Golden Lion Shiki's wild laughter could fade into the woods, a dark shadow carrying the scent of death cleaved down from above. Clang! An ear-piercing metallic clash erupted. Shiki's legs buckled slightly as he crossed and raised Sakuraju and withered wood, firmly blocking the heavy black blade Shusui. As the blades ground against each other, sparks flew like fireflies in the dark, vanishing in an instant. Not bad, samurai of Wano country. Shiki grinned, his arrogant gaze locked onto Ryuma's handsome, impassive face. Ryuma's eyes were resolute, carrying a hint of excitement from meeting a worthy opponent. He suddenly pressed down his wrists, adding even more weight to his strike. As the two struggled, their clashing energies sending fallen leaves fluttering, a cyan crescent-shaped sword beam tore through the air, striking precisely between their deadlocked blades. TCH. Both sensed the danger simultaneously and retreated instinctively. The sword beam grazed their noses and struck a distant mountain wall with a boom, leaving a bottomless slash mark. They looked toward the source of the beam and saw Hawkeye Mihawk slowly raising his blade. On his perpetually expressionless face, a long-absent, almost joyful smile appeared. Hey, don't leave me out. With a loud shout, Jigoro pounced toward Hawkeye like a cannonball. His long sword transformed into an airtight net of blades, launching a storm-like assault on Hawkeye. Cling, clang. Hawkeye's gaze sharpened. Gripping the black blade, Yoro with both hands, he steadily parried every strike, the crisp sounds of clashing blades merging into one. Zanpa. Shiki wasn't one to just watch. He swung his twin swords, sending two spiral-shaped slashes along the ground like rolling earth dragons, lunging toward the crowd in the fray. The scene instantly turned into a chaotic mess. There were no fixed opponents. 1 second, you're testing the weight of your swordsmanship against Ryuma, the next, you have to watch out for Hawkeye's tricky and eerie cyan sword beams. Just as you dodged Jigoro's dense net of blades, the Golden Lion's overwhelming slashes rained down from the sky. Everyone fought for themselves, yet they had to keep the other three within their perception. You never knew from what angle or from whose hand the next fatal attack would come. The small island's wails never ceased. Sword beams crisscrossed, and the booming never stopped. The four-man battlefield had long since run out of stable ground. The earth looked like cheese sliced by a mischievous child with a knife, covered in intersecting ravines. Ryuma and Hawkeye's swordsmanship was bold and grand. Every swing seemed to cleave heaven and earth, causing swaths of trees to collapse and hard rocks to be sliced into smooth surfaces. Meanwhile, Shiki and Jigoro's sword beams were denser and sharper. Wherever they passed, whether flora or stone, everything was shredded into the finest dust, scattering with the wind. The camera slowly pulled back to the edge of the island. The azure waves tirelessly lapped at the beach, churning up white foam. However, whenever a wave surged ashore, the aftershocks of the battle from deep within the island would act like an invisible giant hand, forcibly slapping the tide back into the sea and kicking up even higher sprays. The deafening booms, mixed with the sharp, piercing cries of swords, composed a terrifying song of destruction. This hearty slaughter lasted for an entire day and night. Finally, in another round of frenzied clashing, a faltering presence could no longer hold on. Put! A golden slash accurately tore through the defense, slamming hard into Jigoro's chest. He let out a muffled groan and flew backward like a broken kite, rolling several times on the ground before stopping. Cough, cough. Jigoro lay on the ground that had been plowed countless times by sword beams. His chest heaved violently, and a trace of blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, yet his face beamed with a satisfied smile. Refreshing. Truly refreshing. he forced himself to sit up. Instead of rejoining the fray, he watched with great interest from a short distance. Only 3 remained on the battlefield. Ryuma and Shiki still had long breaths and seemed at ease. Hawkeye, however, was starting to struggle. Too strong. Fine beads of sweat broke out on Hawkeye's forehead. Every parry, every swing required his utmost effort. Before these two legends standing at the pinnacle of swordsmanship, even a moment's lapse would result in a heavy injury. Clang! He took a heavy downward slash from Ryuma head-on, his palm numbing from the shock. But his gaze remained sharp. Using the recoil, he spun his body like a top and returned a fierce kesagiri. However, Ryuma simply parried horizontally with a casual air, easily neutralizing his offensive. Lion's Thousand Cuts Valley. Shiki's attack followed immediately. Countless fine golden slashes, like a blade storm, enveloped both Ryuma and Hawkeye. Neither dared to be careless, quickly swinging their sword beams to block while rapidly dodging. Another day passed. Fighting at full strength without reservation for 2 consecutive days and nights was too much of a burden for the current Hawkeye. His breathing grew heavy, and his swinging speed slowed by a fraction. It was this fraction of a delay that Ryuma accurately captured. A simple and unadorned yet powerful slash broke through Hawkeye's defense. Not good. Hawkeye's pupils constricted. He could only hold the black blade, Yoru, across his chest. Boom! He was sent flying violently, his feet plowing 2 deep trenches dozens of meters long into the ground before he barely managed to stop. Immediately, a sense of exhaustion flooded his body. He could no longer hold himself up and knelt on one knee, propping his body with the black blade, Yoru, panting heavily. He looked up at Ryuma and Shiki, who were still clashing fiercely in the distance. In those hawk-like sharp eyes, a sense of frustration at his own weakness appeared for the first time. The gap was still too large. His current self was still too green. But Hawkeye gripped his black blade, feeling the ache in every inch of his muscles, yet the battle intent in his heart burned even more fiercely. The gains from this time were enough. Next time, I will definitely be the last one standing. Hawkeye made a vow in his heart. He wanted to get stronger, even stronger. Jihahaha. Samurai, now it's just the 2 of us. Shiki shook the dust off his swords and looked at Ryuma with burning eyes. Ryuma smiled faintly and stood with his blade raised. Then, shall we settle this in one strike? Just what I wanted. Shiki replied dominantly. Then come. The moment the words fell, the aura of both men changed abruptly. Powerful armament haki instantly covered Shiki's twin swords like ink. Then, an invisible aura of a sovereign burst forth. Black and red lightning danced wildly on the blades, crackling loudly. On the other side, Ryuma's black blade Shisui also hummed. An equally dense conqueror's haki, like an awakening giant dragon, coiled around the pitch-black blade. This legendary samurai, who was hailed as the world's greatest swordsman hundreds of years ago, was impressively also a top-tier powerhouse who had mastered Haushiku infusion. Flying Dragon, Samurai Extreme, Dragon Slash! Ryuma shouted in a low voice. He kicked off the ground, soaring into the sky. Holding Shusui with both hands, he cleaved straight down at Shiki with a power that could sever heaven and earth. The black and red lightning made him look like a god of slaughter descending to earth. Jihahaha! Bring it on! Seeing this earth-shattering strike, Shiki's smile became distorted and fanatical. He gripped Sakura-ju and Witheredwood tightly, the Haushiku lightning on the 2 swords reflecting each other as he met the attack without hesitation. Lion, Cross Annihilation. 2 figures, 2 attacks that condensed the pinnacle of their respective swordsmanship and haki, collided like 2 stray planets. Boom! At that moment, the entire world seemed to lose all sound and color. The sunlight around them was completely swallowed by the thick, inseparable haki storm, forming a field of absolute darkness. Black and red lightning intertwined and tore at each other, neither willing to yield an inch. The clouds above the small island were torn in half by this soaring aura, revealing the azure sky behind them. The sea surface outside the island was pressed down by an invisible giant hand, sinking several meters deep out of nowhere. Hockey lightning flickered and erupted around them. The ripples of energy pulverized the last remaining ground beneath their feet. Both gritted their teeth and stared wide-eyed at each other, veins bulging on their arms. Their blades let out unbearable groans under the intense energy collision. Finally, when the two auras reached their peak, and that sphere of dark energy expanded to its limit. Chapter 110, Hawkeye's Departure Boom. A world-shaking explosion, loud enough to shatter eardrums, suddenly erupted. A destructive energy shockwave, centered on the two of them, swept out in all directions in a circular ring. Two figures also flew backward together amidst the dazzling light. Hawkeye and Jigoro stood at the edge of the small island, the sandy ground beneath their feet trembling uncontrollably. Coming from the center of the island were two terrifying auras that seemed ready to tear space apart. One was wild and domineering, as if it wanted to trample heaven and earth underfoot. The other was as resolute as a mountain, carrying an awe-inspiring intent to cut down all evil in the world. The collision of these two wills had already surpassed a simple contest of sword techniques. Hiss, Jigoro subconsciously took half a step back. He could clearly feel that the aftershocks of the aura escaping from the forest were like countless invisible razors, slapping against his body in waves, sending bursts of sharp, stinging pain through his skin. And this was just the aftermath. If someone with slightly weaker willpower and strength were standing here, they would probably be knocked unconscious on the spot by this overflowing aura. Rumble. Finally, after a deafening roar, those two relentlessly entangled terrifying auras slowly subsided like a receding tide. Deep within the island, there was a moment of dead silence, followed by two hearty, dripping with delight laughs that soared into the sky. Jia ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. As the smoke and dust cleared, two figures walked out one after the other. Golden Lion Shiki clutched a deep sword scar on his chest, his long golden hair somewhat disheveled, but the smile on his face was wild to the extreme. As for Ryuma, his breathing was merely a bit hurried. Aside from those few shallow sword scars, he actually had no other significant injuries. The winner and loser were already clear. I lost. Shiki didn't care about his wound at all, laughing heartily and frankly, as expected of the former world's greatest swordsman. You truly live up to your reputation. Perhaps only that bastard Roger could match you in the way of the sword. Ryuma looked at the golden lion before him, secretly shocked in his heart. This guy only used swordsmanship. If he were to go all out with his monster-like physical stamina and that bizarre fruit ability, it was truly hard to say who would win or lose this battle. Your swordsmanship is the strongest I have seen in all these years. Ryuma sheathed his black blade Shusui and replied humbly, I only won by a narrow margin. Jia ha ha ha. Just then, Hawkeye stepped forward, his sharp eyes flashing with an unprecedented light. Seniors. He bowed slightly, his tone carrying a hint of excitement. This sparring session has been very rewarding for me. I think it is time for me to set sail again, to travel the world in search of more experts to validate my own path of the sword. What? You're ready to leave already? Shiki raised an eyebrow. Hawkeye nodded, yes. Ryuma looked at this determined young man and gave an approving smile. Young man, while sword techniques may be strong or weak, the path of the sword knows no hierarchy. When you travel the world, observe the different paths of others, it will help you properly align your own sword heart. He reached out and patted Hawkeye heavily on the shoulder. In the future, I will be waiting for you to come and take this title of world's greatest swordsman. Jigoro also had a face full of smiles as he nodded to Hawkeye, clearly thinking very highly of this junior. Aren't you going to say goodbye to Linyi? Shiki asked. Casually. Hawkeye thought about it but still shook his head, a cool expression squeezing onto his stoic face. Between men, such things are unnecessary. When I return, we shall meet again. The group arrived at the seaside. On the beach, besides the large ship they had arrived in, there was also a small, coffin-like single-person sailboat anchored quietly. It was Hawkeye's ship. Jiahara, Shiki looked at the small boat and laughed. It seems that Kid Linyi already expected you to leave directly after the sparring session. Hawkeye looked at his small boat, and a rare, nearly imperceptible smile curved at the corner of his mouth. With a leap, he landed gracefully on the boat and nodded to the three on the shore as a farewell. The small boat slowly drifted away from the island with the waves. Hawkeye sat steadily at the bow with his arms crossed coolly, looking every bit the expert. However, he didn't take out the black blade, Euro, from his back to row. He just sat quietly, letting the boat drift with the current. It wasn't until the island completely disappeared from his line of sight that he breathed a sigh of relief, picked up the black blade, and resignedly started acting as an oar. On the shore, Shiki and the other two boarded the large ship. Rise! With a low shout from Shiki, the entire large ship, under the influence of his Fuafuwa no Mi ability, ignored gravity and slowly floated into the air, then turned into a streak of light, flying straight toward the Sabaody archipelago. Midway, as if remembering something, Shiki casually swung several sword slashes toward the sea below. Several unlucky sea kings were directly slashed until they were covered in wounds, floating on the sea surface on the verge of death. Roar! The souls of these sea kings were torn from their bodies by an invisible force. Before they could even struggle, they turned into streams of pure energy and surged into Shiki's body. That terrifying wound on his chest actually healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, becoming as good as new in the blink of an eye. Jia ha ha ha. Shiki rubbed his smooth chest and laughed triumphantly. The soul form is indeed convenient. I recovered so easily. Sabaody archipelago. Lin Yi looked at the three descending from the sky, counted the heads, and immediately understood. This Mihawk, he curled his lip and complained with a look of annoyance. Does he think leaving without saying goodbye makes him look cool? Seriously, next time we meet, see if I don't give him a good lesson. He grumbled and cursed, but then led Ryuma and the others into Rayleigh's coding workshop. Mr. Rayleigh! Lin Yi's voice arrived before he did. Is our myriad soul ship finished with its coding? Rayleigh, who was wiping a long sword, looked up and smiled, almost. It should be finished by tomorrow morning. His gaze swept over Ryuma and Jigoro, finally settling on Golden Lion Shiki, a flash of surprise crossing his eyes. Shiki, you now. Rayleigh looked at his smooth head, which had returned to its original state, and said somewhat incredulously, you look like you're in quite good shape. Hearing this, Shiki laughed triumphantly, his signature "Jiahaha" echoing through the entire coding shop. You bet. He reached out and rubbed his head very happily, with a look of enjoyment. Current me is much more comfortable and at ease than when I was alive. That's it for today. Meet you in next part.